and thank you for tuning in to Starting Small. Today, I'm joined by Neha. Neha, thank you so much for taking the time.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so we'll dive into full glass a little later, but to kick things off, to start out with your upbringing, if you can share what was your childhood was like, and then where did you grow up?
So I grew up in Orange County, and it's really interesting, right? Because my parents were immigrants. And so they really ingrained in me the concept of, you have to figure things out and you have to really make things happen. And I had, it was my mom, my dad, myself, and I have a younger sister. And my dad is a financial planner. And growing up a lot, my mom would tell my dad, why are you bothering these girls, these two young girls with having to figure out their personal finances or things accordingly? And my dad would say, they need to be able to take care of themselves. I
Hmm.
need to know that my girls are able to handle things on their own. And he really hammered that in for such a long time. And that really created the stage and the foundation for me wanting to understand finance in general across the
Hmm.
board.
Yeah, incredible. So growing up, I mean, with some of those principles instilled, what were some of your interests growing up? Maybe athletics, entrepreneurship, then any teases of that, or what did that look like?
I loved tennis.
Mhm.
I think there was always, in sports, there's a fun thing, right? When you're dealing with dynamic sports where you're on teams, then there also is the individual component when you're dealing with things on a team.
Mhm.
Tennis was really interesting because you're part of a larger team, but you're really looking at the individual performance. So it's always about how do I figure things out? But then the I has to be tied towards a greater sense of a whole. My
Mhm.
younger son right now, he plays hockey. And when you're on hockey, he's 6. It's really a team sport. Everyone is doing it together.
Yeah.
But what I liked with tennis is that you have to really get out there and you have to create ways to make things happen because, again, it's still just you, right? I was playing
Yeah.
singles, which is a really interesting kind of a thing.
Yeah.
The thing about entrepreneurship that you brought up that I think is so funny, I've
Mhm.
always done things in entrepreneurship in some way, shape, or form, and I'll share with you some stories. But the funny thing is, when I applied to business school, I remember hearing about this word called entrepreneurship. When
Yeah.
I applied to business school, it wasn't that popular back then. This is back
Yeah.
in 2004, 5, 6 time period. And
Yep.
it wasn't as strong of a word. It was just a way of being.
Mm.
Right. And so there's so many little things I remember that I was doing. I'll give you something fun that just came to my mind. When I was
Yeah.
in high school, we were told this is before we had social networks. There was no, MySpace, nothing like this was out there when I was in high school.
Mhm.
And basically, one of the things that occurred is one of our teachers said, listen, if you're good at math, and I'm Indian, go figure, I can do good math, right? So they're like, if you're good at math, why don't you teach, tutor some of the younger students? Like if you're a junior or senior, you could tutor the freshman and sophomore. So everybody wanted to do it because you can make money doing this. And so everybody's filling out this sign up sheet, right? And then
Yeah.
we're putting our name, our contact information on there. And then the younger students, the freshman and sophomore would look at this and then they could reach out to you.
Mhm.
I thought, what is a way that I can stand out and be unique? Because this is a great way to make some extra cash.
Mhm.
I end up writing my name and phone number in a hot pink pen. And it might sound so simple, but there's a lot of females who were apprehensive and nervous about math. And then when
Yeah.
they saw my name and phone number in a pink pen, it
Interesting.
put them more at ease. And I ended up getting such a higher number of calls.
Wow.
And the thing was, I asked people later, I'm like, why did you end up reaching out to me? There's so many names on the sheet. And they're like, well, it seemed less daunting reaching out to you. And
Wow.
that for me was like my marketing 101.
Yeah.
Know who your target demographic is and how can you resonate and how can you talk in a way that they're going to hear or they're going to see.
I love that.
And so I've never actually shared that before. It was just something you said, when you're growing up, what are some things that kind of came up? And that was for
Yeah.
me really something that stuck
I love it.
and kind of going down through entrepreneurship.
Incredible. So, what did college then look like? So you applied to business school as you mentioned, but I'm curious, what did you study, and then where did you end up going as well?
So I went to undergrad at UCLA. I ended up going to grad school at USC. I joined the other side for a
Wow.
moment.
Yeah.
And UCLA, I was an economics major. And then in business school, I emphasized in finance. And
Cool.
I still wasn't looking at entrepreneurship then. I went into banking right after
Mm.
business school, because
Wow.
I was always taught or, just our social networks where you go into structured environments.
Yeah.
And I remember always seeing this world of entrepreneurship, as I started to get older and you would hear about these startups in this space. And then when I was in banking, a lot of the companies that I dealt with were also in the startup space,
Mm.
so it was very interesting.
Yeah. So post graduation, as you mentioned, you got into banking. How long did that journey look like as far as the banking point of things, and then any career pivots along the way prior to getting into entrepreneurship?
Oh, I mean, that was my biggest pivot of all, right? I was working in
Yeah.
banking and this was so I was there, 2008, 9, 10, 11, like 12. And 2008 was the Great Recession. It
Yeah.
was probably one of the best times to be in banking for
Mm.
me. And the reason is because essentially I had the opportunity to see, a company that was doing really well. Or there are two different companies that have the exact same product. One company is doing very well, and one company didn't make it through the Great Recession. And
Mm.
so I had the opportunity to really dig in and see what was it about those two companies that set them apart differently. And for so much of the time I would end up seeing it was about the infrastructure, the
Mm.
operational infrastructure that was set into place. And I'm looking at so many of these companies on a mass standpoint. So, because just deal flow was so high. I was at Bank of America, I know Bank of America Merrill Lynch. I was there during the acquisition. And
Yep.
so I got to really see so much of what was going on. And I ended up leaving banking because I saw how a lot of these startups were and how they were operating. And I thought, oh, I'm so smart. And I was young. I'm like, I'm so smart. I could do better than some of these entrepreneurs. I ended up leaving banking and starting on my own entrepreneurial journey. And I can tell you, I did not have a slice of humble pie. I had
Mm.
multiple pies thrown at my face every
Yeah.
single day. It is not easy. It is not for the weak. It is
Yeah.
not for the faint of heart. And, I thought I was so smart, but you don't know what you don't know.
For sure.
And there's so much I did not know.
For sure. No, I would love to jump into some of that and maybe dive into some stories along the way as well. But what did that path look like? So when you left banking, what was that opportunity that you were trying to seek?
So I left banking and I was working on starting a tech startup, which was financial planning for the masses. It was something that was near and dear to my heart. I know so much about personal finance. And so it was, okay, let me try to create this for other women and create a tech tool. I ended up bringing on some friends and family money. I worked on it for just under 2 years. If you're going to be, what I did not realize back then was this was a tech company. I never put
Mhm.
that title on it because I kept on calling it a personal finance company, but it's a tech company.
Yeah.
And if you have a tech company, you need someone at the founder level, ideally, who has a tech background. And it was very, very hard. I
Yeah.
quickly realized after working on that for just under 2 years, where my skill set truly lies is working with companies that, have a little bit of the Play-Doh that is there, but they're looking to essentially scale and grow. Because I know how to put structure in place. I have that operational know-how and expertise. But at the
Yep.
same time, taking something from 0 to 1 million or 0 to 5 million, maybe not be, in my preference, or I'm not the best as some other people are in that space. But it was
Yeah.
really hard for me going from structured environments my whole entire life and going
Mm.
into the startup space.
Yeah.
I
That's a huge
I
shift.
didn't know how to take packages to like a FedEx.
Yeah. Wow. So, I mean, in the early stage there, you mentioned, I've had a lot of founders on who lead tech companies. So at the early stage, did you end up finding someone? What was that first co-founder or hire? And like, how did that play out there?
So I ended up hiring someone who had they were phenomenal here in the US to kind of help me, but a hire is not the same thing. And I was young, and you need to properly make sure that people have the right incentives and they're aligned, right, with
Yeah.
you, that their incentives are aligned with you. And I didn't do that. The person that I brought on board was great, but they ended up outsourcing a good amount of the work. And then when we started to have some difficulties with some of the tech pieces, we brought somebody in-house full time.
Mm.
And then we ended up finding out that a lot of the code was in Russian.
Oh, wow.
So we had a lot of challenges at the time. Again, this is a while ago now. This is like 2012, 13 time period, but we
Yep.
definitely had some hardships to overcome.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, maybe your exit time period here, maybe 2013, 14. What was that next journey pivot for yourself? Did you stay in the startup space or what did that look like?
So I actually went to a company called drinks.com shortly after, like around
Mhm.
2015, I think it was 2014, 2015, which
Uh-huh.
was so I had been in financial services in some way, shape, or form for a very long time and teaching. And I really wanted to get experience at a company that had a physical product. And I ended up meeting some of the team from drinks, and it seemed like a interesting opportunity. And so I ended up going there and working in direct to consumer wine. The
Hmm.
funny thing about it, which is what makes the story a lot of fun, is the co-founder and I over there ended up establishing a very good relationship. This is now like maybe 2016 time period, I think it was.
Mhm.
And I ended up leaving the company and I ended up saying, we're going to work again together one
Wow.
day. And
Wow.
he kind of laughed at me, and he lives in Chicago. And once, a year or every other year, we'll get together, or twice a year for coffee or drinks if he's in LA or I'm in Chicago. And I say, we're going to work together again one day. And he'd be like, haha, that's pretty funny. Um, and, I'll give you all the fun stuff in between. But fast
Yeah.
forward to today, he is my co founder at Full Glass
Wow.
Wine.
That's incredible. So getting into the D2C space, I mean, that's a shift from your large corporate and then from the startup, the tech side. So drinks.com, moving forward from there, did you stay in food and beverage prior to Full Glass?
So right after drinks, I went to a company called Create and Cultivate. So
Mhm.
Create and Cultivate is an entertainment, it's really an events and media company essentially.
Yeah.
And they were looking to get the majority shareholders of the company were looking to get the company sold at the time. And they said, listen, you've been in the startup space, you get it well, you also get what it looks like to scale, and you worked on companies while you were in banking that were looking to, do an IPO or get sold. And so let's bring you on board and see if you can make this happen. I just had my first baby at the time. He
Wow.
was 3 weeks old, and I ended up joining Create and Cultivate when my baby was 7 weeks old.
Wow.
So January 2019, I ended up starting there. The time horizon for that one was we wanted to get the company sold within 2 years. We took about 2 years and 3 months, so pretty close. We got the company
Wow.
sold. But in my defense, there was a global pandemic in the middle of
Yeah.
all this, so
Yeah.
it was definitely a ride.
That's so cool. So, I mean, joining that company, what was the size of the team and maybe the scale at that point compared to exit?
So we were probably around, it was a small company, just over 20 people, 22 people or so. We probably were around the same when we sold the company. The intent here essentially was to put into place the infrastructure for the company so that the company could show that it's scaling. It's an events company. So you almost want to think of
Got it.
Coachella, right? And
Yep.
so the thing that ended up being very interesting for us is we started to go ahead. I want to say we did this on purpose because we're so smart, but this is the startup life, right? Some things work and some things don't. You got to take
Yep.
all of the fun with all of it, right? So
Yep.
one of the things for us that we started to do is I started there in January, and the summer I realized that you know, a lot of the people were traveling for our event. So if people are traveling for our events, you can't actually scale out a company by just adding on more events. You can't have Coachella every
Mm.
single weekend and think it's going to be the same thing, right? Similar
Yeah.
concept. So we started to actually work on on selling digital assets in the fall of 2019.
Mm.
Now, again, I'd like to say that we did that on purpose and we foresaw the future of what was going to occur. But
Mhm.
it was very fortuitous for us. And the reason is because in 2020 now, when COVID hit, a lot of our competitors in the space were not able to convert to digital quick enough. And
Mm.
so there was a lot of appetite in the market for not only consuming content online, but also for companies by the end of 2020 to be able to place their ad spending dollars somewhere.
I see.
Come and create and cultivate. We
Yeah.
went from having a business where our margins were anywhere from like 30 plus percent to for 2020, we were hitting 90 plus percent
Wow.
margin because our biggest cost was Zoom and personnel, right? And
Yeah.
our personnel cost, the difference with our type of company is you deal so much with contractors and freelancers. We
Yeah.
went through in February of 2020, or 2021 2020, I was essentially looking at bringing on board a banker, getting our accountants on board, getting everything ready to go to package the company for a sale. And then COVID hit.
Wow.
It was definitely an adventure. We
Yeah.
went through three potential transactions. The third one went through. The first one was with a search fund. The second one was with a family office. Both of them ended up backing out at the end hour. And then, which happens in deals all the time. And then the third
Yeah.
one was with a private equity firm. And we closed the deal on March 15th, 2021.
Wow. So I'm curious at that time, especially as an event company, was it the pivot towards more tech, remote, online? Was that the convincing points for the acquisition for the purchasers, or what was it at that point? Or was COVID slowing down at that point as far as like in person goes?
It's a combination of all of it. So we closed in March. Our company was highly profitable before COVID.
Hmm.
So COVID just helped the company really boost up cash even more so, just because we had the infrastructure in place to essentially push out digital assets.
Yeah.
And so there was a huge demand for digital consumption at the time. We had a whole entire online conference called Money Moves, which occurred in May of 2020. We had something like 26,000 attendees all over the
Wow.
world,
Wow.
that were paid attendees. So it was, you can't replicate that over and over again. You want to remember in May is just a time period where people were very hungry to get human connection. And there was
Yeah.
so many other things going on in the world at the same time. So it was a place for people to collaborate and get together as community.
Yeah.
But for us, essentially, the biggest thing is in the startup space, a lot of people, let me take a step back here. A lot of people always talk about pivoting. And you brought up the
Yeah.
word pivoting as well. In the
Yep.
startup space, just like entrepreneurship wasn't a word for me growing up, it's just a way of being. So is
Mhm.
pivoting in the startup space. We don't sit
Yeah.
there and say, I'm going to pivot.
Yep.
You just move. You don't have time. It's sink or swim. Right.
Yep.
And so you just have to figure out, what are all the different pieces that I have? It's like a poker game too, right? Like, what are all the different cards that I have? I'm not going to sit here and make it right or wrong, but what are
Yeah.
the hands that I can currently play with the other players that are currently at the table? And that's it.
Yeah. I love that. Getting into Full Glass, there might be a lead up story to this as well, but I would love to kind of look back at the note that you made to your colleague, who's your co-founder today. You're going to work together again at some point. So, coming from the event side, getting back into like beverage, especially getting into acquisitions, where does this idea come from? And I know if I recall, he approaches you with this idea, and like what did that encounter look like?
So actually, it's really interesting. So a lot of people will ask me these types of questions, and they say, "Well, how did you go from one thing to another?" But I didn't. They're all tied together,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
So after Create and Cultivate, the founder and I left the company, and we launched a fund, a small CPG fund called New Money Ventures. We
Mhm.
ended up like in our world. I don't know if it's just the startup world or just the world in general. I still have time to figure it out in life, I guess. We'll see. But
Yeah.
everything is connected in some way, shape, or form. So the second group that looked to buy, Create, and Cultivate, that was a family office that ended up pulling out.
Mm.
When the founder and I were leaving Create and Cultivate some months later, we went back to them and we basically said, listen, we want to launch a fund. Would you like to put money into the fund? And they said, absolutely, start to finish, 3 weeks. They fully funded the fund that we asked for,
Wow.
one LP. While we're running that fund now, again, there were the people that backed out from us. And I was pregnant, by the way, while we're selling Create and Cultivate with my second child. And
Wow.
I found out like all these deals were falling through, and I felt like I was getting sucker punched while I
Oh
was
my
pregnant,
gosh.
right? And so the family office backed out during that time period. It was in
Wow.
November, early November of 2020. And
Mm.
my daughter was born December 24th. So it was definitely a fun experience. But we kept good relationships with them. We went back. We ended up talking to them. We ended up getting the capital for our fund. We're running the fund now for about a year and a half plus. And I saw something really interesting in the market. Interest rates were so low, which everybody knows.
Mhm.
The interest rates were so low. And so what was actually occurring in the market is you have so much cash floating around that the valuations were getting pushed up. Now, the
Mm.
valuations were getting pushed up because there's so many people competing, right, to invest into some of these companies. And
Yeah.
so a lot of founders across the board were getting very confident right? And asking for very high valuations. I went, to a couple people and I said, you don't want to do that because if you're a CPG company, specifically if you have anything that has inventory, you're going to need capital for two more, if you're going to need capital for marketing and you're going to need capital for inventory within the next 18 to 24 months. If you have enough runway, go get the highest valuation you want. If you don't, you might want to be a little bit careful. And I got told, Neha, you're trying to, not being great to founders. You're trying to tell us that we should get a lower valuation. You don't have a crystal ball. And I said, listen, you're right. I don't have a crystal ball, but I have textbooks. I teach accounting and finance at UCLA undergrad.
Awesome.
And I'm like, I've seen this over and over again. Right. So anytime in history where interest rates are so low and kept that at that point for an extended period of time, there's lagging economic indicators. And these are one of them. So I'm like, I don't know if I'm right or not, but people are so firm and so adamant that they can get these valuations. It doesn't make sense to me. So I said, I want to start to keep my eye out in the market for companies that can have challenges. Winc actually then in 2022, December or Thanksgiving, they filed for bankruptcy.
Yeah.
The co-founder of the fund and I, she was really into wine. We had started a small fledgling wine brand just for fun. And so we ended up getting early news and hearing about Winc filing for bankruptcy. So us tied in with the family office, who was our LP, ended up making a bid for Winc.
Wow.
I ended up calling my co-founder at the time, who's now my co-founder. He actually didn't pick up the phone. And then I called him 2 or 3 times. He didn't pick up. And then we were in the process and I couldn't really talk to anyone for a while for the next couple of weeks. He ended up calling. Then he figured out what was going on. And then he called me every day for the next couple of weeks. I think not all weekends, but just about every day. Because then
So wait, were you able to answer?
Mm-mm.
Oh, so you didn't even pick up the phone.
Mm-mm.
Wow.
We ended up losing the bid. Another company bought Winc.
Oh, wow.
And then I just thought that was that. Right. And then come January of 2023, January, February time period, our fund was then fully deployed. And Lewis and I ended up connecting and talking about it. And he said, listen, if I can talk to Amass and I can buy the direct to consumer portion of this company, what do you think? Would that make sense? We started in conversations with them. We ended up then putting all of these companies together under one hood. And, full transparency, if you said to me, Neha, did you have an idea that you were going to buy this many companies this quickly? No, I didn't. We thought we're going to do 2, maybe 3 companies. We ended up doing 7 companies.
Incredible.
9 brands in about 16, 17 months.
Wow. Along
with our Series A. And then we also did our bank facility. It's been an adventure.
That's incredible. So kind of bring us through those first couple acquisitions. So Winc was the first one that did eventually come through.
Correct.
How long until that second acquisition? What did the scaling that look like for you guys?
So we ended up buying Winc we ended up closing on Winc in June of 2023. In October of 2023, we closed on a company called Wine Insiders. Then in March of 2024, we closed on a company called Bright Sellers. In June, we closed on Splash. In August, we closed on a company called Scout and Cellar. In October, we closed on 3 assets out of bankruptcy for Vintage Wine Estates, which were Cameron Hughes, Vanessa, and Windsor. And we already ended up selling Windsor about a month and a half later. And then in November, we closed on a company called Wine Access.
Wow. So for the listeners out there, if you can kind of take us through. So I've had a couple different brands that have either acquired companies or they take over and manage. So what does the relationship look like once you do acquire one of the brands after acquisition?
So it varies. It's a case by case basis, right? So the intent for the brands is to essentially keep them as independent as possible. So what we essentially do internally is we have a shared services platform. Shared service is not a new thing, obviously, right? Everybody does it for accounting and finance. You also can do it for operations. So think wine buying, logistics, all of that. We also do it for marketing. So marketing actually operates under a shared services model. So think SMS text, think email marketing platforms, campaigns, etc.
Yep.
What we do have separate are the brand. So brand identity stays under its own specific group. And the intent for that really is that there's a person or a team that essentially really understands the vibe, the voice, who that demographic is, so that we
Hmm.
can make sure that the marketing efforts and the product being bought is right for that target demographic.
Yeah. I love it. As far as like the logistics and manufacturing goes, is that a shared? Does that go over shared service, or do they remain with their
It
current?
does because what it so some of them we're getting from the same people, so the same wineries,
Yeah.
but it's the actual purchasing of it goes under the shared services group. Because
Got
now
it.
you're really thinking of, I remember back when I was in business school, we'd read all the cases on Walmart, right? And it's
Mhm.
always economies of scale. And you're like, but doesn't everyone just do that? Isn't that the most simplest thing? Then
Yeah.
you actually start to realize when you're in the real world of business that it's not always as easy to replicate that,
Mm.
but that's what we're looking to do here.
Yeah.
So it gives us the highest leverage and negotiating power with all of our suppliers, but it
For sure.
also allows the knowledge and understanding to be with the right group of people. So
Mm.
they have an understanding of how to talk to certain suppliers, what makes sense, how to properly deal with them, right? Because they have the
Yeah.
right level of education, because the knowledge also scales, which is very valuable in our type of a space, because our
Yeah.
product is a bit more unique than we're making a red shirt,
Yeah.
right? So it's coming from fruit. There are varietals, there's lead times. Lead times also vary. And
Yeah.
it's not always as predictable as some other manufactured products could be.
Mhm. For sure. As far as the category continues to grow, we all know D2C continues to grow for food and beverage as a whole, but for the wine category, what are you seeing as far as the category growth looks like? Maybe in the past 10 years and then going and on forward as well.
Yeah. So if you're looking at, the last 10 plus years, you're going to see a big spike during the COVID time period, which everyone has seen. But if
Yeah.
you look at the time from now to like 8, 9 years ago, we still have, it's on a constant upward trajectory, which is why for us, the space is really great.
Yeah.
I'm a bit industry agnostic, which I think you've kind of figured out by asking all your questions anyways, which is what I think you were kind of going for on some of those things.
For
But
sure.
to me, I do love wine. I mean, it's
Mhm.
hard not to, right? And I'm a big champagne drinker. Um, but it's still, I'm essentially just looking at the business component of how all of this works.
Yeah.
And the thing for us that's really nice is that things like COVID, you already have people were already moving towards an increased appetite in regards to getting product shipped home. So the
Mm.
consumption increased from that regards. COVID
Yeah.
allowed for ease of use and being more comfortable with those types of items.
Mhm.
So for us, our biggest competitor really is, Trader Joe's,
Yeah.
Costco, places like that, because what we aim to do is provide convenience and discovery. Those are
Mm.
the two big components that we essentially have. So I have two little kids. I have a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old. If I'm going to Trader Joe's and I'm like, oh, I have a couple of my friends coming over and we're going to have a wine and cheese night. If
Yep.
I have to grab 1, 2, 3, 4 bottles and I'm trying to juggle that along with my kids, that's
Yeah.
kind of a next level thing.
Yeah.
It's nice for me to just have them delivered at home. I can have a 6 pack, a 12 pack, right? One of our brands
For
even
sure.
does 18 packs. So that's a nice thing. The other thing is that wines are constantly changing. What's in
Hmm.
season is constantly changing. What comes up in harvest is constantly changing. And honestly, sometimes people just don't want to think about it. It's
Yeah.
nice to have someone else do the work for you and then
Mm.
also allow you the opportunity to discover new types of wines.
Yeah.
And that for us is a really big thing. And it's nice to be able to provide that for our customers.
I love it. As far as the main demographic goes overall, what are you finding? Is there differentiators between brands and then also just like in the D2C space for wine in general? Like, what is the primary customer?
So our brands actually, and the people, I can't take credit for this because it was this way when we acquired the companies. They did a really good job of segmenting out the consumers. So
Hmm.
we go all the way from, we have like, for example, Splash. Splash is a lot of people who want to bulk buy good wine at great prices, right? And so
Yep.
the majority of packs for that brand really are 18 packs, which is very interesting. That's a very large size. So you have to be living in places also where you have a little bit more room. So you're probably not in New York City to have an 18 pack, but
Yeah.
they're really taking on large pack sizes. You go from there to Winc, which obviously you're familiar with, where they're very buzzy, Instagram oriented. It's a lot about it is about the aesthetics and the vibe of it. We have a
Yep.
phenomenal collaboration, which we just did early last year. It was one of our first collaborations on our own with a brand called Guest Check, which is so much fun. I
Mm,
absolutely love it. We also have some other fun things that are coming out in the next couple of months. I'm very excited for that brand.
awesome.
Then we go all the way from, we have that, we have Wine Insiders, other brands, and then we have, Wine Access. Wine Access, so the majority of our product is private label.
Hmm.
Wine Access are branded wines. So we're able to get really great allotments of a certain champagne, which we might get a limited number of, cases that we can offer to our customers.
Hmm.
So Splash, the price point will go anywhere from $8 to $10 a bottle. Wine Access, so on the other end, you have Wine Access, which goes from $30 to $1,300 a bottle.
Wow.
Right. So
Yeah.
we also sell wine futures, right, for very avid collectors through Wine Access. So what our customer demographic is across the board.
For
The
sure.
reason this was really important for us, but each one of the brands has a very specific targeted segment.
Hmm.
We are very happy for people to be in any one of the prongs under our umbrella. We also are very happy to have people go through their life cycle with us. Maybe somebody
Yeah.
wants to come in and try wines through Wine Insiders. And then later on in life, they're like, you know what? I'm going to buy wine from Wine Access. I
Yeah.
go to Winc personally, I go to Winc and I go to Wine Access. If I have my friends coming over and we're doing a girls' night, I'm getting Winc wines. If my
Yep.
mother-in-law is coming over, who has very discerning taste and she helps so much with my kids, I want to make sure I'm getting a nice high end wine that is going to make her feel extra special. And so I might pick her up a bottle from Wine Access.
Yeah.
Our goal here is to create a seamless customer experience so that when you're under our umbrella, the technology behind everything occurs as the same. So it's easy for you to go from one brand to the other.
Yeah. Well said. Incredible. So, I mean, I haven't seen many brands that have had the quick growth that you guys have had. It's really incredible. And I would love to hear your insight on this. And it's a question I always wrap up with such an incredible story so far. If you can share one piece of advice with an aspiring entrepreneur, maybe something you've learned or regret along the way, what would you say that would be?
It's a really good question. I'm thinking just for a
Mhm.
moment here.
Yeah.
Don't hesitate. Don't wait for permission.
Mhm.
So many times in life, I think so many of us are sitting there waiting for permission for someone to say, oh, it's okay, you can do it. If you have faith, you should go out there and you should give it a try. When
Mm.
I was younger, back when I was in banking and business school, I would a lot of times think that you need to get some sort of an approval from someone. You
Mm.
need a sign off.
Yeah.
The thing that I love with the startup space that I've gotten very good at, and it's a muscle, right? Because the first couple of times I did it, I was apprehensive and I was nervous. Now
Mhm.
I don't think about it anymore. I don't hesitate. I just go. So my advice would be don't wait to ask for permission. Just go out there and do it.
So well said. I love that. Well, Neha, thank you so much for taking the time. And to the listeners out there, make sure to check out Full Glass at fullglass.wine.